Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ampliverse Book Club. This month, we're closing out the year 2022 with a novel called Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston.
I don't actually know.
Okay, we'll go with McQuiston, but we'll check their pronunciation later. Thank you. And here is the lineup of today's book club. Using pull quotes from the reviews for the book. So first off, absorbing, hilarious, tender, sexy, Allie.
Is it because of my red lipstick?
Absolutely.
I put it on to channel
red.
Nora. I felt like Nora would do a red lip, so I was like, yeah.
A little red goes a long way. Up next, romantic, sexy, witty, and thrilling Catherine.
I don't know if those are the words I'd use to describe me, but I'll take it. A
lot of sexy, which we'll talk about in the book.
I mean, it is quite sexy.
Quite sexy. And then finally, yours truly, fireworks in the sky, glitter in your hair, joyous royal romance. It's me, RJ. Hello. Okay, we are jumping right into it. We are talking about Red, White, and Royal Blue. Like we said last month, we chose a BookTok selection, a book that has kind of gone viral on TikTok for many reasons, one of which is primarily because this book will be adapted into a movie, and they've kind of like used very Gen Z TikTok marketing to kind of hype people up as they film. They announce the cast, blah, 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 blah. So it's very much in the zeitgeist. And so, we are always on the pulse here on the Ampliverse Book Club. We know all the latest trends. And so I think it was befitting for us to read Red, White, and Royal Blue. And, I think it's a great choice. And we're going to jump right into it by asking the question, did we like this book? And
I think Allie has earned the right to start us off here.
Allie is about to leap out of the screen because she wants to talk about it.
Listen, this was just like a very good coincidence for me. Did I suggest that we read a BookTok book so that we could read this book?
The pieces are puzzling. Okay,
maybe I'm trying to think about when I suggested that versus when I actually read this. I have read this 3 times in the past month.
Wow.
I have zero chill about it. I love it so much. I feel like it was written specifically for me, and I'm going to be a lot today, and I can't.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I don't know what, I feel like it's one of those things where it's like my hard work finally paid off. I got you guys to read this book. It's so rare that I get people to read books that I want them to read, and so this feels like
that is a real thing, especially now where there is so much, like, God forbid a TV show or a movie. There's so many things available to us now that
I would like to say though, this is at least the second book that you have suggested that I have read as a part of this book club.
Thank you so much.
That is the format.
Thank you.
Yeah, we lift each other up.
We do. And you're right. That is the format, because I have had that feeling with the Stephen King and the Jurassic Park.
That's true.
Big grateful feelings that other people were reading books that I loved. So,
yeah. So, I mean, anything outside of, your forced manifestation on this book to us, Allie? Anything outside of just the general, like, why do you love this book?
Well, without getting into like too much and too deep, so, Catherine, I don't know if you know this about me, but so I studied political science in college, and then I actually worked on professionally on a campaign in 2016, on 3 campaigns actually, for the Indiana Democratic Party. And so this was just like really special to my heart to read this kind of like fun. It's like Parks and Recreation, West Wing, just like all the idealism in the world, everything that I want politics to be, tied up with just a really precious love story that is
with a queer little bow.
With a queer little bow. And I love, I'm also in my rom-com era. I've been reading a lot of romantic comedies, but this one far and away, honestly. So that's all I'll say for right now.
Amazing.
I don't want to filibuster book club.
The conversation.
Bless.
Amazing. Catherine, how about you? Did you like this book?
I did like this book. We'll start there so that Allie doesn't have a heart attack when I say the next part.
Yeah.
So I started the book and I was like, because it has this, and it could be that it's not like a YA read type. Like it has this voice to it that I attribute to YA novels because every YA novel I've ever read has that voice. And I don't know if, I don't know how else to define that voice. And so like, I was like, I don't know about this.
I describe like, there are 5 things that I hate about Callie McAllister at high school, and this is what it is.
I literally I could not recreate it. I can't, but when I read it, I go, oh, there it is.
That's it.
There she is.
It is, I think, technically classified. This is just a learning thing for you as a new adult, which is like basically it's like YA, but you say fuck and you can talk about people fucking.
Okay.
So it's like YA, but
plus. It's YA plus.
Yeah.
Okay. So at first I did have that like initial reaction, but I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the content. And by the time we were having positive queer conversations, I was very much into it, you know.
Right.
It's still not my favorite type of voice, but I mean, I gave it 5 stars. It was definitely 5 stars of enjoyment, you know, regardless of that being not the voice of a novel that I typically would choose or like, but I do like it and I would reread it. I told a friend I was reading it and they were like, oh, the gay one? Like, it was pretty great. But yeah, for me, I really liked it. I didn't read the notes. I'm so sorry, you guys. So if this is getting ahead of...
No, you're totally good.
The part that really got me was the way that Alex's mother reacted to the various coming out situations. That was the first time I cried. I was like, I wish that this is what it was like for everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So there was that. And then of course the bittersweet of, God, what if this could have been the world? You know, you can't help but like regret where we are. So anyway,
I do love, Allie, that you kind of gave us that little hint before we read. Like
I needed it. I'm really glad.
because I think we both did it of just
what
the idea
hint
of
did
like
I give you?
You gave the hint of like it kind of rests on like the what if, you know,
Okay.
Hillary
I've
won.
said so many things about this book, it's hard to keep track.
That's solid.
Yeah, so I think giving us that, for me at least, on the reading experience, I was like, okay, I cannot. There was still a little bit of separation as I was getting through it because like as soon as I saw an email, I knew where this was going. So that was kind of the idea of like, I need to see what they're saying, what they're relating to each other, but know that like something is going to come, you know, that will strike a chord to what we all communally experienced from 2016 to 2020. Yeah. Anything else, Catherine?
I mean, when I read the first email, and I was listening at the time, I texted Haley and I was like, oh no, something's going to happen. Like, I was like, oh no, like immediately.
Yeah.
So there was that, but I did really enjoy it. 5 stars for sure. Totally
Nice.
Deserving. Yes.
Amazing. I also liked it, Allie. So there you go. You can.
Yay!
You are good to go.
You can die
yes,
happy.
You can die happy. Okay, so I really liked this, and Allie, mirroring your experience, it kind of came coincidentally along with just like what's going on and what I'm consuming, at least in pop culture right now. I am watching a lot of Korean drama, and Korean drama, especially on the ones on Netflix, are very. I mean, they are melodramatic. They are like romance stories. They like kind of, you know, the push and pull. And the trope enemies to lovers kind of came as like something that I watched one. I like thought it was so delicious. And I just like sought out every other K-drama that had like the enemies to lovers trope. And every single one has delivered for me. So when I was starting to read this book, literally in the midst of all of my watching, I was like, oh no, enemies to lovers. Oh no, I'm screwed.
And I love that it's enemies to friends to lovers.
Absolutely.
Even better, I think.
And that pipeline is definitely...
That is an important pipeline.
I know.
And that definitely,
You're right,
like, yeah, and I think that's the beauty of changing the circumstances of the relationship. And so, obviously, loved it, especially loved it because it was a queer story. And then I just ended up kind of, like, really just relishing in the relationship, like finding their discoveries in the relationship. I agree with Catherine. I do, like, I also have that kind of, like, I don't know, maybe it's the, like, trauma of like, okay, this didn't happen to me, so I'm gonna be really skeptical at certain parts. But I think, like, for me at least, I had to kind of, like, keep being reminded that, like, I am reading something and having to just be like, it's going to be a bigger hurdle for me trying to, like, not believe it rather than if I just jump in and say, suspend disbelief. I am just jumping into this world. And I ended up enjoying it once I kind of, like, made that kind of, like, transition to not resist certain things. But I will say, with all of those, it is still way more believable, I feel like what happens there. The characters felt still so real. Everything that Alex said and thought, everything that Henry said and thought, and everyone around them were all like, okay, these are all justified. I never got a sense of, like, why that person would never do that or this would never happen. I'm like, these are all still things that could still happen in real life.
It's just too pretty. It's too pretty a bow with the world that we live in. But like you said, it is a friendly place to live temporarily. But I also can't believe that I skipped that I loved the Star Wars references.
I knew you would.
I knew you would. And
I literally
the
have
hilarity of, like, that was what basically made Alex like, oh, you're a real person. I'm like,
right. Like, I literally have never tell me the odds tattooed on my body. Like, literally tattooed on my body with a giant leg piece of other Star Wars things. Like,
I really loved that one. And I also really loved when Alex is like, I'm the Han, you're the Leia. And Henry is like, I accept that in that you're a scruffy looking nerf herder. And I was like,
I laughed. I laughed and I smiled. It did bring me joy. It did bring me joy.
I need to, like, because I was saying it in the group chat, but I saved a lot of quotes. Just, I think, because it is so, it's so specific in how he talks, and really almost like how queer people talk now, of, like, laden with pop culture references, growing up where you had nothing, so you kind of just, like, stick to what you love on TV and movies and media. And, like, Henry does the same thing, but on his version, where it's, like, reading his classics. And I think it's just so fun to, like, use that as their way to relate to each other. And there were so many versions of that I loved.
I loved the email quotes, the quotes at the end of the emails. That was adorable. I loved that. Loved that.
Yeah. I think so. One thing that I will say about, like, the politics of it all is that Casey McQuiston has said that they started writing this in 2016, and then when everything happened, they were like, "Oh, let's shelve this."
Yeah.
And then finally came back to it. And I think that for me, like, one of the things about it is that when we're talking about, like, suspending disbelief, I think that there's this kind of, like, collective therapeutic need for stories like this, where it's not to say that, like, you know, nothing bad is ever going to happen, but it, like, presupposes
bad things did happen. Like, they still were jealous.
They are continuing to happen, actually.
But just the idea that the people in their lives were fundamentally good at heart, and that there's people in the world that are that way, I think is
and, like, that's clearly, like, such a reaction to, I think, the big adjustment that we all had from 2016 and its repercussions were like, oh, bad people can still win. And I think we all thought that, like, we just all thought that we
It
all
wasn't gonna
inherently
happen.
yes, we all inherently thought that like if
We're
you're a bad
past this.
person, yes, exactly. But then it's like, oh no, like people
No.
that are bad, like you might know someone in your family that may have voted for him, and that now is a bad person, and now you're like, oh, you know what? How do I come? Like
Speaking of Star Wars, it's like there's this thing, like there's some quote somewhere that's like, you know, me watching Star Wars, like, how come every time this society frees itself, it just gets enslaved back into these terrible empires? And then, oh.
yeah,
And I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
this.
And so I think like that's definitely evident in like what you were reading, and it was a really nice kind of like way back into that feeling, I guess. But to go back to like all of the things that I've been watching at the same time as this. So like I'm watching a lot of K-drama and a lot of actually gay drama. And in a society that is a lot more conservative, at least like with just kind of like what you're able to show. All of the shows that I watch will, like, if it's like 12 episodes or 8 episodes, they're gonna kiss on the 6th episode, like that. And then reading this book where I mean
0
like
to 60.
0 to 60, and I was kind of thinking back, like, okay, when I first watched Love, Simon, which was like another, kind of gay coming out story. Yes, movie that was in the zeitgeist maybe like 2 years ago. There was a movie, it was originally a book. But when I watched the movie, I was like, this feels like it's sanitizing the coming out story. Like there's an obvious sexual part of someone's like sexual awakening when they find out, oh, I am attracted to something, and I don't know. It was just really interesting to go back and forth of like the modesty of like the media that I was watching before of like, yeah, it's an 8 episode show, but they hold hands on the 4th episode. They finally kiss on the 6th episode, and then they finally have sex on like the finale, like the end credits after scene. Going into this where it's like fully like all I am thinking about is X, Y, and Z, and there's like truth to all of those. And I think that's what I love most about having this book in existence, is that you're not seeing perfect representations by any means of like, and there's no clear path. Like there's no direct path of how someone can come out, someone's sexual awakening is like, and I don't know. I just really liked that it was like different and unique at the same time.
I have a question for you, Allie. So I think it was in the extra chapter that, thank God, I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to read.
The Henry chapter.
The Henry chapter. There was some kind of comment about June and Nora. So are they together, or did I don't?
I think it's just a fun up in the air for the reader to make their own assumptions.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad I didn't miss anything. I was like, did I miss something exciting? Do I need to go back?
I think it's just there for readers to make their own assumptions and decide what they want.
That's fair.
I think like the main thing I mean, we'll talk about the ending, but I really liked that it wasn't a sad ending, and I'm so happy. I really thought, I mean, obviously as I was reading it, I'm like, okay, they're going to try and make this work. If they've already kind of created this world that like you're discovering that like everyone around Alex, more specifically, I mean, it's told through his perspective more, but like you get more of a sense that like if something happens to Alex, like, and this comes out, he will be okay. Like there might be repercussions to what that could mean for, what his mom is doing, but at the end of the day, he'll be okay. And so I was kind of leaning into like, okay, I think it'll be a happy ending, but I'm just so relieved because it really did. There is something of like, yes, this relationship can't happen because of like monumental international scale. And then it actually happens. So it's like, okay, will you actually, the worst thing happened. So will this actually come, you'll still have a happy ending. And I'm glad that it did. So. Mm-hmm.
I think too, with a lot of romantic comedies, especially book books, there's like what they call a third act breakup, where you're literally like 90% of the way through the book, and then they're like, I don't think this can work. And so I really appreciated, I mean, there was a little there, but it wasn't like towards the end, but like when, you know, Henry leaves the lake house, right? Like there was but that was only like halfway-ish through the book. And so, and that's not to say, like, there was enough drama going on its own that I was really glad that there wasn't like, do they love each other? Are they going to stay together? I liked that it was, they like had the conversation and they were like, we don't know what it's going to look like, but we want to be together. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, I love that about Alex. Like, I kind of hated it at first. Not hated, but I was just like, okay, yeah, like, I get it. You're like, you know, the son of the president. You want to like rebel. You and your sister kind of have your own ways of rebelling, and this is your way of just kind of being very much headstrong. But at the, you know, I was really appreciative that he kind of stuck to that to try and figure out, you know, after the lake house, like, how can they get back together?
Yeah, and I think it's a very realistic conversation, because it wasn't, like you said, there was no question of, do we care about each other? That wasn't
That's
there.
not the question.
That's not the question. The question is, are we going to be okay if we do this? Yeah. Is our families and our countries going to be okay if we do this, you know? Yeah. And I think, you know, obviously that's high stakes, you know, but it is very symbolic of what a lot of queer people go through. I know I've been through it, where it's like, is my family gonna disown me, you know? Yeah. So like, I was like, I'm not coming out until I'm with the person that I want to be with for the rest of my life, because I'm afraid, you know?
Yeah.
I think, Catherine, you mentioned Alex coming out to his mom, but I also really liked, when he's with his dad, and his dad's like, okay, and he's like, and Alex is like, oh, I thought you would need a minute, and Oscar's like, why would I? And he says, you know, it's different when it's your own kid, and Oscar's like, not for me, it isn't. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, let's talk about the coming outs, because I've had very big reactions to the different comings out.
The different comings out
that
That's
happened.
Fair. That's fair.
I loved when Alex came out to Nora. I really loved it.
It was very funny.
And it kind of immediately hooked me onto Nora as a character, because like we all have that friend who will just like straight shoot you. It's just, but then it's like, not even just straight shooting just to be like, I want to cut the bullshit, but it was more of like, I just thought it was obvious.
Right.
I thought we all knew.
When she said the probabilities, I died. When she was like, there is a 70 whatever percent chance, and a 100% chance this is not hypothetical. It's like,
it's so good. And it, like, I think like if I was Alex in that position, and even like his age, if that were to happen to me, I could think like, if I was in that position, I would be, you know, hurt, offended, maybe a little bit, but mostly hurt. But now, like, as a 30-year-old, I'm like, that is so refreshing to be like, knowing that was all in my head. You know what I mean? Like, it was all either like make believe or like fake pressures that you've put in yourself, but like stepping back, seeing a third party look at what's happening, it's like, oh, I thought that's what because you're not seeing what you exude, or you're not seeing how you put yourself out there. So it's like, we've already all accepted it, because that's how you naturally are. It's not like you're changing anything that you're doing. So that's what I really loved about Nora's coming out to Nora.
And I think that's one of the things that I love so much about the characters and the relationships, because, you know, like you were saying, RJ, where it was like, you know, you would be like hurt if someone said that to you, where like it just feels so true to the characters and to how they interact with each other, and the way that it's written, that Alex is like, this is what Nora does for me, you know, like this is where I'm at, and this is where she's meeting me. And I really liked the way that those relationships were written.
Yeah. And then of course there's June's coming out of already knowing what the hell's going on, which is even, I mean, it's very tight sibling relationship, which is not an experience that I have. But it made sense to me, and I did enjoy it. Although there was more hurt there, I feel, you know, whereas Nora was like, duh, you know, June was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I think it's the dynamic of like, because June relies so much on Alex. I think that I don't think she was like, well, I rely so much on you. You should know that you can do the same to me. Yeah, and I think that's that sibling, like, sibling relationship. The other coming out. Oh, go ahead, Allie.
I was just going to say, I just pulled this quote that when they're emailing back and forth and Alex says to Henry, if all else fails, just do what I did and act like a huge jackass until most of your family figures it out on their own.
Yeah, I know. The other one that, like, also in the same vein as Nora was when he reached out to Liam. And Liam is such an interesting character.
I loved the Liam moment. That was great.
I really like Liam as a character because Liam is a real person. And when I mean that, I'm like, we have all had Liams. Like we have had people where maybe not necessarily like with this situation, but like they were... You're
in middle school and you're at your friend's house.
Yes, and like you're just trying to figure things out with them and like almost like use them in order to kind of like figure stuff out about yourself, but then have the excuse of like, well, we were just kids, so like, but you don't realize like the repercussions that could have. And I'm glad that Liam was here as a character to be like, that sucked. That's kind of why I don't like talking to you anymore. But him to have that kind of agency of like, I don't know what's going on, but my life is like this. So if that helps you in any way, go ahead. But that's it. I
don't know about you.
I don't know about you. And so and then when it came full circle at the end, I think was also beautiful because I think even though that's the case, at the end of the day, we all like, as a queer person, how hard that is. And so by seeing kind of Alex's experience, obviously, and like being outed publicly, it's like, okay, just so you know that I am still on your side, even though, we're cool. We're fine.
Right. Well, and the thing is that like, obviously Liam wasn't like out, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it wasn't like, to me, it wasn't like Alex was like exclusively using Liam.
Yes.
It was like you said, I mean, it is often an excuse like, oh, we were kids, like, that you can fall back on, but they were both exploring and figuring things out. It's just that maybe Liam, I mean, we don't have all the answers to that because we don't know everything about that relationship, but based on Liam's hurt, I would assume that he was a little more clear about at least later on the desires or intentions, but my favorite thing was when he was like, are we really doing this right now? I'm at lunch with my boyfriend.
No, literally, that was the best part. That's the thing. It's like, I can't be involved in your little sexual crisis. Like, I'm so sorry.
I'm at lunch with my boyfriend. I gotta go. Like, I was like, this is great. Also, the audiobook, the accents. Because Liam had a thick Texas accent. Oh. He goes, are we really doing this?
Amazing.
I'm at lunch with my boyfriend.
Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was excellent. Anyway.
Can I also, I'm curious to know when you started reading this. Because first of all, I went into this with no expectations. I knew that it was supposed to be like the first son of the United States in the Prince of England falling in love. Did you go into it assuming that Alex knew he was gay or bisexual?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And when he was having the thoughts of like, oh, I might not be all hetero, I literally hit the stop and be like,
I was
sure?
like,
right?
Yeah, I was like, how are you sitting in every chair you sit down in?
Yeah.
Like when he was talking about hooking up with the girls, like that early in the book, I was like, what? Like already it's just, I don't know. It was something about the voice of the character, in my opinion.
Literally the voice, the references, everything, the small snide whatever. I literally was like, I just assumed, I actually thought Alex was already gay, and that was the thing of like,
I'm glad
he is the gay son of the first female president. Okay. That's just the thing.
Yep.
So that was kind of shocking, and I think that still goes back to that original thing of like, sometimes people just don't know. Obviously, that's why you need the Noras, the Liams, and whoever. But then also like, not everyone has that journey to their self-discovery, so it was refreshing to kind of get Liam as a character from being like, already did this. I can't
Right.
do this with you, but good luck. Like, honestly, it's going to be amazing. You just have to get through it, but please
Leave me alone.
leave me alone.
Yeah, I did really love though that like throughout the book, Alex continues to be like, oh, I'm bisexual. Like
Yes.
when
Absolutely.
he's out, when they're at the karaoke bar and he says bisexuality is truly a rich and complex tapestry.
Yes.
He's like, I'm attracted to men, I'm attracted to women. Like I liked that like that representation was still there and it wasn't just like,
Yeah, I agree.
no
And I
bi
think-
erasure.
Yes,
Right.
no bi erasure, no bi now gay later. I think like by having him just be very steadfast on that of like making the connection of like, yo, yes, this is literally who I am. That was not a question for me after that. And it was really refreshing to see that kind of like develop.
Right.
Okay. I want to jump into the snow globe that is the Claremont Diaz America. Because when
I
I
wish
read
that's where we
this-
lived.
when I read this book, I did not expect the thing to really hook me was the world building of a fantasy world where a female president who is not only divorced but also is like, like
Texas.
has mixed children. I was
Yes.
like, this is so, and it was so specific in a way that like it got so deep into like, what would a Texan Democrat look like? What would a Texan woman Democrat look like running for office? Like, given the, like, yeah, that West Wing treatment, the Jimmy Smits treatment of like, if this person is someone that we want to push as a future president, world leader, what would that look like?
I'd vote for her.
And then like
Same.
building the cabinet, building the team around her, building the White House specifically for her. I was like, this is so realistic and like so genuine that I believe this, and now I'm mad.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That was the bittersweet of it. There's like there were two moments towards the end of the book, and I texted you guys one of them where it was like there are young girls alive today who have never known what it's like to have a white man for a president. And I like that one full
That got
flow
you.
of tears.
That got me, gal.
Because it's like, oh God, like who knows when that'll happen again? Who knows?
Yeah.
And then the other time, I took a screenshot of it, but I don't have my phone. But it was towards the end. I think it was after they knew that spoiler alert, give it a pause. After they knew that she won. And I think it was like maybe her announcement or something. It was something about like in 2016 you showed us that blah, blah, blah. I can't remember
victory
exactly what it
speech.
was. Yeah. And I was like, this is the end. I'm dead. This is horrible.
Yeah.
Reality is garbage. I hate it. Real life. I hate real life.
I think one of the things that also really resonated with me, there's a scene when Alex is still working on the campaign and he gets into an argument with his coworker, Waspy Hunter, about like not giving up on Texas. And as a blue person in a deeply red state, I think it's that kind of idealism, and I think it's like a really important conversation that needs to be had about like these people who feel forgotten in these states that like they want to be spoken to as well. Like you can't just forget about them, and you can't
Georgia.
just
Yeah.
like you can't just give up on them just because you think that's like, and also recognizing that like we've created, I'm using the royal we've created these systems that have like so deeply entrenched like certain parties in certain parts, when it's like that's just not what the voice of the people is. And so I think that conversation that he had and like when it all came down to Texas and having Texas turn blue, and just that idea of like, things can change and are changing. And again, it's just that like just bright-eyed idealism that is so important.
That a lot of us have lost.
Yeah.
It's been because it's been tough.
It's tough
It's
to
been a
find.
shitty. It's been a shitty. How many years? 8.
Yeah.
It has been a shitty while. It has been a shitty while. And I feel like it all just came to a head in 2020. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I feel like it was building. It was building, don't get me wrong, but the pandemic just broke. It just broke us, you know? It broke me. I won't speak for everyone.
Yeah.
But.
And I think too, like, it's funny because Allie, we've had this conversation before of like, yeah, like when you know, Democrats leave red states, like, is that actually any better or worse? Like, yes, it is hard to live there. Yes, absolutely. And you will find like a stronger community when you move to like a bluer city or a bluer state. But then it's like, what impact does that leave for you know, Democrats that still live in primarily red places? And like, how can you create the change if you're not there, you know?
Yeah. And I think that kind of complicated relationship with where you're from that came up again and again. What he kept saying like, Texas made me, you know?
Yes.
And it's one of those things where you're like
really emotional. Actually.
I know. No, RJ, me too. Where you're like, this is what made me. And like, I can't leave that behind. Even if I feel a certain type of way about it. It's like, I love myself and I'm who I am because of where I came from. You know, I
know.
Feeling a lot of things right now.
And that's the thing, that I came in for a hot, sexy rom-com. Okay. I love.
Oh, you did get that.
And I did.
It was there.
You know, as someone who loves The Crown, Catherine, as people who love The Crown, and we love saucy whatever. I did not expect the
Political idealism.
The political idealism, and also just like the identity. How proud Alex was of his identity. And I wrote this on a note because we're going to discuss about like, you know, our qualms for the movie adaptation. And I don't know much about it, but if they even whitewash just a little bit of Alex and Oscar, I am going to be so mad because the idea
that's part of it.
That is absolutely part of him, the presidency, like, just that idea of the Texas Maid sentiment is so strong that I'm like, it's so beautiful. And I think like that's what people forget sometimes about America is that, and now I sound like an idiot, like a crazy person, like that's what's great about America, but it is, you know, that is real, you can find either a spot for yourself, you can find something for yourself, and the liberties that we have can create like an amazing person like Alex and his family.
Well, I can tell you the actor playing Alex is of Middle Eastern and Mexican descent.
Okay, great.
And
Mixed
he
representation.
grew up not 1 hour away from me.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Really?
Yep.
Our reactions, both of us. Oh.
Which, I mean, that's great because then if, like, so they're like Indiana or Midwest?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then just that same
Indiana.
sentiments too of like, you know, kind of growing up in a different race and in a place where it could be predominantly white, you know.
And you know who's playing Ellen Claremont? Uma Thurman.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
That is not how I pictured her. I pictured her.
Who did you picture?
Hold on. There is a distinctive actress, but I don't know where. Like I'm sure she's like some random extra in Law and Order SVU. Like she's like kind of a stocky woman. She's got long blonde, like not long, shoulder length, straight blonde hair and a deep Southern accent. Like just kind of that's what I pictured. But
I pictured like a Sigourney Weaver type.
Oh, okay. Well.
Just because that's what's, you know, I think, or no, Commander-in-Chief was
Gina Davis.
Gina Davis. I pictured like a Gina Davis.
I don't know necessarily that this is who I pictured, but the voice in my head. Catherine, did you watch Parks and Recreation?
I have seen episodes. I did not watch it.
Okay.
Like
there's a character by the name of Jessica Wicks. And
which one is that?
She's the one who was she's Nick Newport's wife. His like trophy wife.
Yeah.
Who works with Ben at the foundation. and she has like a very Southern accent, and she like when she's like, "Come on, sugar butt," like that was the voice every time that Ellen Claremont spoke. I was like,
it was very creative. Like I think the writing of the voices of all the characters have been were truly amazing. Like I immediately heard all of them, you know.
And I think that especially with like millennial speak or whatever, it can be so cringy. Yeah. And I especially in text messages, I feel like a lot of times authors like totally weight them down with like a million emojis.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was the perfect balance where it was utilized very well, not too much. You know, you kind of got into the flow of how Henry and Alex were communicating with each other without being like totally bogged down.
Yeah, there's that idea of like, yes, I know this is cringy, but it's the truth. And I love that they kind of just like leapt into it.
See, that was the worst part of the audiobook. For sure.
Oh, yeah.
That makes sense.
True. The emails.
True.
Reading the emails from, and like every, like, Prince dickhead poop emoji. Like every time. Like,
okay, I will say I think that I would feel the same way of like, I wouldn't want to hear that.
Spelled it out.
Seeing it in print was very, very nice. Yeah.
Because I got it from the library, because that is what I always try to do.
Yeah.
I had the audiobook on my Libby app from the library, and I was driving a lot when I was listening to it, so I was like, I don't have a lot of choices. But as soon as I was not driving, I was like, can I get this on ebook from the library? And so when it would get to those parts, I would read it, and I would read the rest of that chapter so that I could easily skip to that in the audiobook. So
nice.
But yeah, because I was like, I'm done with this. Done.
It would behoove me if we don't talk about just the rest of the characters, and if anyone has any like specific shout outs that they want to talk, because I think we all agree that like the characterizations and how lived in everyone is probably one of the best parts about the story. And I just want to throw out, I've already talked about Nora. I was not expecting Catherine to kind of Deus Ex Catherine at the end there. Yeah. Because there was a moment where as I was reading it, I was like, do I actually care? Is this believable? What's going on here? But then at the end of the day, I was like, in that world, in the I can't think of the monarchy. In the monarchy, obviously respect and honor and all of that goes a long way. So I think just by having someone older, someone more revered, even though like she may not have been, totally active in Henry's life, but that is someone that can stand up and use their voice to say what they need to say and to protect Henry. I was like, okay, I think I do like that, especially because knowing that is important. Like imagine if Charles were to ever say, no, Harry and Meghan are fine, like that would go a long way,
Right. I also love how the Queen fully tried to be like, he's just your roommate, right? Like, I mean.
That is classic. I mean, that's literally how I feel like our older generations kind of deal with it, because those are lines that I've heard. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Same. Yeah. So been there.
I loved B.
Yes.
Henry's sister. Yeah.
I got like a real like Fleabag feeling from her.
Helena
you know what
Bonham
I mean?
Carter. Yeah. Helena Bonham Carter was the picture.
I had for B. Okay, yes. Her little monologue to Alex about when she's like, I'm going to go all sponsory on you. Just that whole thing.
That intro is great. When I read that, I was like, oh my God, that is so good. It's so good.
Do you know what we're talking about, Catherine?
No, I don't remember. When
after the emails are leaked and Alex goes to Kensington and Henry's asleep and they're talking and she's like, picture all of your emotions.
Yes. When she's explaining why Henry is the way that he is. Yes. I remember that now. Yes.
Yes. Yep. I mean, we feel like we've not talked about Henry at all. We
haven't talked about any of the gay sex. Like, I'm really impressed with us. We did a good job, you guys.
I know. I mean, there's really nothing to be said about the gay sex because there's a lot of it.
There's a
a
lot
lot
to
of
be
it,
said
and
about it, RJ.
fully understandable. I would totally get it. And every thought and intrusive thought that Alex had, I was like, yeah, that's fair.
Just a quick note on the gay sex before we wrap things up here. I fully, after their first sexual experience, I texted Haley and I was like, I know you're not reading this book, so I know this means nothing to you, but I really wanted to know who was the bottom. And I'm very disappointed that I didn't find that out. And then later I texted her, I was like, what? I found it out.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah. You kind of have to.
Because it was
No, you
after
do.
the first one. I
Yes.
was like, really?
Yeah.
Wait a minute,
Come
what's
on
going
now.
on? Yeah.
Right. Anyway.
To me, it made sense. I think.
Oh, it did for sure. I was like, I
Absolutely.
should have known.
Listeners, we're not
starting
gonna
up a poll.
Yes, we'll take a survey. But let me just say, if you ride a horse,
Alex sweating while watching Henry play polo.
oh my god, the polo.
Oh God, after the polo. In the tack room.
Just the sport.
All of it. The polo thighs.
The polo thought, and I just love that like, and it's that idea of like, you know, when you have a crush on someone and you don't know yet that it's a crush, you just are like obsessed with that person for some
Yes.
reason, and that was
Oh,
like the
God.
thing for him, where it's like,
Every
God,
crush I
he's
had
so
for many years.
he's so annoying. Look at how muscly his body is when he rides a horse. God, that's so
That's so
stupid. What a
stupid.
stuck up. And then literally like all of that coming out during their trysts of like, oh, this is why I kept thinking about that, because I want it in my mouth.
I was like,
The teen magazine.
Right,
I
I was going to say,
know,
you were
that's
petting
so-
his hair on a teen magazine.
I know,
Like,
which is so funny because that's literally what I did with my sister's Cosmopolitan magazines growing up. I literally would, when she would be at school, I would be in her room reading her Cosmos, doing the
love
exact same
that.
thing.
I love
So shared queer experience.
me watching Bring It On, being like, I love this, and I do not care about cheerleading at all. I don't understand.
She's like, I love cheer. It's a contact
This is so
sport. We
great.
have to protect it. We
What
have
an
to
art
honor.
form.
What an art form. Absolutely. Oh my God.
Oh,
Well, I mean, I'm very happy that we read this book. I'm very happy, Allie, that you forced
Yes. Thank you.
manifested it on us, because I think
I am too.
we all left to 2022 with a much lighter, nicer note, I feel like.
I agree.
I bought so many stickers. Like I have this one that I really love on my Kindle cover.
Oh, the key in the
I know.
That's cute.
I know. And I have so many others.
I need the Princess
I bought
Leia
so
Han
many.
Solo.
There is a
mural.
sticker version of that.
Okay, please send that to me.
Okay.
I might purchase it for real. Or get it tattooed on my... No, I won't do that. I already have.
Too many.
I already have the Never Tell Me the Odds. It's fine.
Because this is our last book in 2022, I've asked the book club a very exciting question to make a selection as our book of the year. So we have read these books, and we can just kind of do it off the cuff, but each of us will kind of select what out of all of the books we read this year was your book of the year, and then we will all collectively decide which one it'll be. So also knowing that, like, obviously, like, I think there may have been one or book that not all of us have read. Just keep that in mind too. But
There was just the one.
it's just the one. Okay.
I think.
No, each one. I think
think for
Allie
me,
had
yeah,
one, and then
yeah,
you had one.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I skipped one completely because of Seuss. Got it.
Yeah.
Forgot about that.
So let me just read the list before we make our decisions. The Meaning of Mariah Carey, Black Boy Out of Time, Invisible Child, Jurassic Park, Song of Spider-Man, We Were Dreamers, The Book Eaters, Sense and Sensibility, Carrie, Red, White, and Royal Blue. And I do want to make a quick note that what a slay for Red, White, and Blue to not only make a Jurassic Park reference, but also multiple Sense and Sensibility references. So I'm like, they knew.
I also
They
texted
knew.
Haley when that happened. I said, this bitch is quoting Sense and Sensibility. Immediately.
I know. Okay, who wants to go first? Allie, Catherine, do you have what you say was your best book was your book of the year?
I feel like you know my answer.
It's Fair. I mean, would
It's
you like to
very-
say
yes,
anything
absolutely.
further
Yes,
about it?
say to try and persuade both of us.
No, I can't.
You
like,
know
I
why.
can't, I can't. I mean, you guys know why. I mean, I brought this book up in therapy multiple times. It made me feel a lot of things. My life's never going to be the same because of this book.
Oh,
And
I love
I think I'm at the risk of sounding hyperbolic. I loved it more than anything.
Oh,
that's fair.
That's amazing. Catherine, did you have a book, a title?
It's really difficult because, like, obviously I love Jurassic Park and Carrie because I was like, let's read these. So it's hard because I love both of those. Of the two, I think I like Carrie more. And then Book Eaters was also really cool because I didn't know anything about it, and then I really liked it. So that was kind of a cool experience. And then Invisible Child was extraordinarily moving, and I think it should be required reading for anybody in any form of public office. So it's like it's really hard because they've been, and like Mariah Carey, I didn't know anything really about Mariah Carey. I don't know. And then I was like, this is great. Like, I don't know. So I don't know. It's hard. Yeah, Mimi. It's hard to choose. I think because simultaneously while reading this, I've been working on The Stand. I think I'm gonna lean back on Carrie and go with Carrie as one of my favorite authors, if not my favorite author's very first novel. So.
Nice. Yeah. I am going to select Song of Spider-Man.
That's a slay. I forgot we read that one. When you said that, I was like, I did love that book.
I thought it was just, I think like, I feel like my theme this year has been very much focused on artistic, whatever, like, I don't know, just like, what are we doing here in the world? What do you want? What legacy are you leaving? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I think like that book did a really great job of like, this is an opportunity for the author Glenn Berger to like make history, obviously, in a very crazy circumstance where he never imagined he would write the book to a Spider-Man musical with Julie Taymor and Bono. You know, like all the circumstances felt just like this can't happen, but kind of like seeing an honest, accurate, and just like a personal, where he reflected a lot on his own artistic whatever, but also like just the state of theater, commercial theater, I thought was just really interesting, and I feel like that gave me a good impression this year, I feel like. But
I was super obsessed with all of that stuff for like 2 months. So
Yeah.
that is a good point, and I totally forgot about it. Even you just listed it, and I forgot about it again while listing all the books. Like, I can't, my ADHD.
But I will say, out of all of the 3 books that we brought up today, I think Red, White, and Royal Blue was what I will be voting for.
We're gonna fall prey to that. The last show in the season always gets the vote. You know what I mean?
That's
because we are all so raw on it.
Yeah.
So
I will say my second choice would probably be Invisible Child.
Yes.
Catherine.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm
think
just thinking
I'm
about
gonna
like
give
books that
Spider-Man
I've rated
number
5
2.
stars.
Yeah, I think I would just give it to Red, White, and Royal Blue just because I came into it expecting the rom-com, did not expect a whole world building, as if, you know, like the world building that I wanted Book Eaters to kind of go in depth in. Red, White, and Royal Blue gave me, and like I kind of fully felt as like, oh, this is what Democrats in Texas are like. Which, I mean, I guess I could just go to Texas.
I was gonna say
and
it could be that
such.
they're not like that at all.
Read an LBJ biography. Your classic Texas Democrat.
Oh yeah, famously, just, you know, what did he call his penis?
Whipping his dick out. It was like Jumbo or something like that.
Yeah, I could not.
Shout out Nora for that
tidbit. I will give it to Red, White, and Royal Blue as well because it is not a book that I thought I would like, and then I liked it. So that's impressive. You know,
that is.
that's impressive. Whereas the other books, I knew I was going to like those. Invisible Child, I didn't. I like a nonfiction.
You knew Sense and Sensibility was just gonna.
I knew she wasn't going to happen. I knew she was not going to happen, ladies and gentlemen. I tried. I really did. I put in my best effort.
Amazing.
But,
You know what? I did read it, and it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
So you can sleep well tonight.
Thank you. I told a friend that likes Jane Austen that I was reading that book and I was not having a good time. She was like, yeah, that's probably not the one I would have picked. So,
well, that's what we did.
We know now.
It was the shortest.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Did you tell her that?
I
You were
did.
like, well, it was the shortest.
Don't blame us for picking the shortest one. Okay.
I did. She laugh reacted to my text.
Well, congratulations, Red Wine Royal Boo. You have been officially chosen as the Ampliverse Book Club Book of the Year. We'll be sending Casey a beautiful tweet.
They earned it. They earned it. They worked so hard.
Yes.
Casey will get
They
a
were
tag.
at the premiere of Some Like It Hot last night on Broadway.
Oh.
Because the director of that show directed Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Oh, amazing.
So
some
fun
good
facts.
things. Hopefully, yeah, good things can come. Well, I'm very excited because now I get to share what our book selection is for next month. We will be reading The Maid by Nita Prose, and this was actually one of the best books of 2022.
According to Goodreads.
According to Goodreads, so the people.
We trust the people.
Yeah, Molly Gray is not like everyone else. She struggles with social skills and misreads the intentions of others. Her gran used to interpret the world for her, codifying it into simple rules that Molly could live by. Since Gran died a few months ago, 25-year-old Molly has been navigating life's complexities all by herself. No matter, she throws herself with gusto into her work as a hotel maid. Her unique character, along with her obsessive love for cleaning and proper etiquette, make her an ideal fit for the job. She delights in donning her crisp uniform each morning, stocking her cart with miniature soaps and bottles, and returning guest rooms at the Regency Grand Hotel to a state of perfection. But Molly's orderly life is upended by the day she enters the suite of the infamous and wealthy Charles Black, only to find it in a state of disarray and Mr. Black himself dead in his bed. Before she knows what's happening, Molly's unusual demeanor has the police targeting her as the lead suspect. She quickly finds herself caught in a web of deception, one she has no idea how to untangle. Fortunately for Molly, friends she never knew she had unite with her in a search for clues to what really happened to Mr. Black, but will they be able to find the real killer before it's too late? Now, Goodreads...
It was Colonel Mustard.
Now, listen. If you
I'll take it seriously.
If you watch Maid in Manhattan and your thought needs a murder, this is it.
Speaking of a mystery, I almost was like, I think Hercule Poirot's Christmas, and then I realized that was last year.
Oh my God, Catherine, Jesus. I did pick this because apparently this is also getting adapted into a movie, and Florence Pugh is like the top prospect. I don't know if she's officially signed, but like that's what the news outlets are saying.
But we bow at the altar of Florence Pugh.
Absolutely.
I don't want to speak for the group, but I absolutely
No, this is a Florence Pugh podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can grab a copy of The Maid and all of the books we've read here on the Ampliverse Book Club at the Ampliverse Bookshop, where if you purchase a book there, it not only helps the Ampliverse, but a local bookstore near you. So that's the bookshop.org/shop/the Ampliverse. Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening along to the book club. You can find us and follow us on all of your social media at the Ampliverse. And we can also keep the conversation going by joining the Discord that's linked on the episode. And if you love the show and the others that we do here, feel free to tip. If you want, you can do that on our Ko-fi. That's also linked on this episode. Catherine, Allie, thank you for a great book year. I am so happy. At my reading challenge on Goodreads passed flying colors. I'm so happy. Who knew?
Sparked by all those Agatha Christie books at the beginning.
Who knew forcing content creation would make for some good goals? So thank you for joining and have a happy holidays.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining our book club. We'll see you next month. Until then, read on. Bye.
Discovering voices, building worlds.